Hello everyone and welcome to the FIDE Grand Prix 2019. These are the quarterfinals. It's Wesley versus Sergey Karjakin. A lot of you have already suggested this game even though it just ended, which can only mean one thing. It's a very nice game. And we even do have a nice photo, also compliments of Nikki Riga, the official photographer of the FIDE Grand Prix. There you have it. Sergey already knows what he's gonna play as Wesley is on the move. So let's just enjoy that for a second. And as it is, first they play two classical games, then two rapid, then two shorter raps as it goes. They've drew their two classical games. Then during the rapid games, Wesley won one game and Karjakin won one game. So they had to go into more rapids. Then both of the rapid games were again drawn, or the first two were drawn, and then the other two rapids, both of them won each game. Not really sure, I'll have to check. But then we go into the blitz game. So here, this is the first game of the blitz section. Wesley has the white pieces. Let's enjoy the game. So Wesley opens with c4. We have the English opening. Knight to f6, we have knight to c3 and e5. Knight to f3, we have knight to c6, the four knights defense, the four knights line of the English. We have g3, preparing to fianchetto the light square bishop, and now bishop to b4. Karjakin already had this position with the black pieces. He played it against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave in the Côte d'Ivoire Blitz tournament in Abidjan. That game ended in a draw. But here it's a bit different. We have bishop to g2 and now castles. Sorry, it was the same up until this point. Here is where the game deviates, because here Maxime went castles and Wesley goes for a different line, knight to d5. Castling is the main line, knight d5 is the second favorite here. So you can choose what to do here. You don't really want to capture, you should move the bishop. If you capture, then you don't really get to punish white for playing with the same piece twice in the opening because of knight to d4. And now, okay, you don't capture the pawn here because rook e8 just wins for black pretty much. You would have to move the knight and then you lose the e2 pawn, and other than that you can just capture on f7 and pretend you have some compensation for the two pawns. But what you can do after knight to d4 is just capture, and after e captures just continue. You can castle, and well, both players have a double the d pawn, but the white's position is a little bit better. So black isn't interested in that. So after knight d5 with bishop to c5, of course you don't want to trade and you don't want your bishop to be captured. With castles by Wesley, and now d6 with e3. And here we enter into a very famous game. Here, Magnus Carlsen, for example, had his position against young Krzysztof Duda in the World Blitz Championship in St. Petersburg in 2018, where Duda continued bishop to b6 and Magnus Carlsen won that game. But here we have rook to e8 by Karjakin, and we enter the game Tony Miles versus Vasily Smyslov in Tilburg 1984. A very nice game that Tony Miles won against Smyslov, but the game very quickly, leaves that game. We have d4 here, the same as Tony Miles played against Smyslov, but now Smyslov went bishop to b6, whereas Karjakin goes for the strongest line, bishop to g4. So Karjakin improves on the game Miles played against Smyslov in 1984, and he plays the strongest move, bishop to g4. So what's the idea? Okay, if the bishop is captured, then e4 is played, but there is no better move here for white. So Wesley goes for it with d captures on c5, and now e4, just attacking the pinned piece. h3 will not help you because after the pawn captures, your bishop is also under attack, so you have to give the piece back one way or another. Wesley just plays knight back to c3, now with ideas of capturing on e4, just grabbing the pawn, and as you have to give up the piece one way, you should do it in the most favorable way for you. With knight to e5, Karjakin brings yet another attacker to the f3 square, so now you have to decide what to do here. You could just play the simple knight captures on e4, give up the piece this way, and after knight captures, continue playing the game. Black will be better, of course, much more active, and you don't want to do this as it's already blitz and you are worse as white. So Wesley did the only thing he could. He played knight captures on e5. He said, okay, I'm gonna give up the queen, but what am I getting in return? Well, Karjakin accepts the challenge, of course. Bishop captures on d1 with knight captures on f7 now, attacking the queen here. And while you can capture, Karjakin doesn't capture right away, because after rook captures on d1, sure, there's nothing right away you can do against the white king, but you can imagine something like b3 being played, bishop coming here, assuming this diagonal, and maybe if, this diagonal, sorry, this diagonal, and if the light square bishop somehow finds his way over, let's say, this diagonal, the black king could be somewhat exposed. So before that, queen to e7, now Karjakin prepares to capture the knight this way, and Wesley just grabs another pawn while he's at it. Knight captures on d6, we have pawn captures, c captures, and now queen captures on d6, and rook captures on d1. So what does Wesley have as compensation for his sacrificed queen? Well, it's not nothing. He does have the bishop pair, and well, for the moment the bishop pair isn't doing all that much. This bishop is just attacking this pawn. Really, you don't really have any chance of capturing it, and this bishop also not doing all that much. But if you get the bishop, fully operational, if they are on optimal squares, then the two of them are basically dealing twice as damage as the queen. So it all depends. So queen to e5, Sergey gets the queen out of the way, and now bishop to d2. Wesley just continues like he didn't just sacrifice the queen. He wants to play pawn to b3, solidify the structure on the queen side, and somehow get his pieces into the game. With rook 8 to d8 by Karjakin, and now bishop to e1. Wesley doesn't mind trading some rooks, but Karjakin just improves his position. b6, he's preparing a5, with b3 by Wesley, and now rook to d3, saying that okay, I'm now ready to double up on the d file here, and you can maybe capture here, but then I'm getting a passed d pawn. And here Wesley does it with rook captures, pawn captures, and now Wesley freed his light square bishop, so that's 1+. But on the other hand, the problem is that this passed pawn is already on d3. So rook to d1, preparing to, fight the passed pawn. Rook to d8, Sergey puts the rook behind the passed pawn. And now bishop to f1, just attacking the passed pawn. And here is where Sergey definitely could have continued better. He played queen to f5, just defended the pawn. What he could have done is d2. It's just a very nice move, which white can't really capture with the bishop, because then rook captures. Rook captures, queen captures here, and black is just winning. What white would have to do is capture with the rook, and then go into this rook captures, bishop captures, and then knight to e4 with a double attack here. After knight captures, queen captures, you would have this position where the queen fights the bishop pair, but the bishop pair isn't still fully operational, so we would probably have plenty of time to go, grabbing some queenside pawns, and then start pushing your own queenside pawns. So after bishop to f1, this is what Sergey could have done, and he also could have gone knight to e4, also a very nice move. After captures, rook to d2, preventing pawn pushing of the pawn, but then the bishop pair really isn't doing all that much. You want to push g5, push g4, and completely lock the bishops out of the game. After this queen to f5 move, not the greatest continuation by Sergey, but okay, it's a blitz game, knight to d5. A very nice maneuver by Wesley, figuring out how to get the bishops operational. Knight captures on d5, and now first rook captures on d3. Now you can't move the knight because you're going to lose the rook here, and the problem is first king to f8 is what Karjakin played. The problem is if you don't play king to f8, if you start with something like a5, you can easily see something like this happen, especially when you're quickly calculating lines during a blitz game. For example, captures, you think, okay, I'm winning, but bishop c4, you lose the queen, you're no longer winning, you're just lost. So, of course, in a blitz game, you don't want to keep your king on a light square if your opponent has a light square bishop, but if your opponent has the bishop pair, then there's really no such thing as a safe square for a king. But still, king to f8, you don't want it on a light square for the moment. C captures on d5. Now Wesley gets a passed pawn, and it's a nicely protected passed pawn because it's protected with a tactic. Because now if you capture it, you still can't capture because of bishop to b4 check. Now if you go to light squares, again we get this line where the rook is free because of bishop to c4, and if you play king to e8, then you get e4. And another very nice idea. Queen captures, rook e3, again picks up the queen. So before that, Karjakin plays a5, preventing bishop to b4 check, but now rook to d4. Again, Wesley defends the pawn indirectly because now if pawn captures, rook f4 again picks up the queen. So queen to b1 by Karjakin, attacking the bishop here and also the a2 pawn, but now we have bishop to c3. And now already you see what's happening, the thing we discussed. The bishop is now on c3 on this diagonal. If this bishop comes to c4 and grabs hold of this diagonal, the rook and start harassing the black king with rook to f4, the bishop pair is almost fully operational. So Karjakin grabs a pawn on a2, we have queen captures, and now bishop to c4. We have queen to c2 attacking the bishop here, but now rook to f4 check, king to e7, and bishop captures on g7. And here Karjakin's last basically good move here was rook captures on d5, but it's hard to see such a move in a blitz game. Not really sure how much time he had, because here you cannot capture the rook, and basically you just eliminated a very strong pass pawn. If you capture it, then just queen d1 check, king g2, queen captures with check, and once you block it, you're also going to eliminate the b3 pawn, and now you have two connected passers on the queen side, which will nicely compensate for all the trouble you're going to get on the king side. But here, Karjakin played rook to d6, and now, of course, you will see what Wesley played. If you don't see it right away, feel free to even pause the video. It's, I mean, it's a very nice idea, as the two bishops are fully operational now. So for those of you who saw it, congratulations. I mean, it's not all that difficult a move. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, bishop to f8 check. And the point is not to capture the rook, but rather to capture the queen, because the king doesn't have all that many squares. The rook controls d squares, pawn controls e6, bishop pushes the king back. So king to d7 was played, and now of course you're not going to capture the rook. First, bishop to b5 check. And now, what do you play? If the king goes up the board, then you just grab a free rook. So Karjakin had to play king to c7, and here, of course, it comes. Rook to c4 check, picks up the queen, and it was in this position that Sergey Karjakin resigned the game, and, well, why did he resign? You will have to capture if you don't want to give up your queen for free, but first black will capture the rook with check. So bishop captures with check, king captures, and now pawn captures, and black has no counterplay here. It's completely winning for white, no point in continuing. And since Wesley was able to draw his blitz game with the black pieces, it means that Wesley So has eliminated Sergey Karjakin from the quarterfinals of the FIDE Grand Prix 2019. Really an insane game. Really, you know, Wesley going all pirate mode against Karjakin. I really enjoyed it, and this is, you know, the kind of chess game that everyone enjoys, so I really do hope you enjoyed it. So yeah, that's it for this Grand Prix for Sergey, but, you know, there are other Grand Prix and other tournaments, you know, and he will obviously be there. But Wesley continues, and he's waiting for his opponents in the semifinals. So we're gonna show at least one more game from the quarterfinals, and then we're gonna discuss the standings and who kicked who out, and you know, some more. But for the moment, this is it. So yeah, I would like to thank Michael Bauk for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the FIDE Grand Prix, continuing the Capablanca saga, and of course, checking up on your suggestions, such as this one. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.